Welcome back to the Tulsa World Sports Extra show. I'm your host, Juwan Lee, joined by sports editor Barry Lewis, columnist Bill Haisten, and OU beat writer Eric Bailey. Some breaking news coming out of Norman. Eric, talk to us.
Friday Night Lights at Oklahoma Memorial Stadiums. First Friday night ever in Norman. Joe Castiglione sent me a quick text saying, "Hey, we're coming out with a release in a couple of minutes about a move." ESPN had asked Oklahoma to move their season opener, which was scheduled for Saturday, August 31st against Temple. They moved it up one day to August 30th. It's just so to be a 6 p.m. kick. Joe Castiglione embraced that for many reasons, including the weather. You think about it, the last few years, Oklahoma's had kickoffs at 11 a.m. and 2:30, and it's neat. This release talks about how it was 93, 96, and 105 during those times. So instead of an afternoon game, you get a night game. Joe Castiglione did send me a text that he understands that this is really going to impact high school football, and he promises there will not be another Thursday or Friday night game for Oklahoma. So I just thought this was really interesting that they're going to start on a Friday night, something really new. But I do know it's going to be an impact for high school football because that is the opening weekend for high school football.
No, it's just to me sickening how college football is just encroaching on high school football. I wrote about this about a month ago. That is just when it was announced that Fox and ESPN want to do more high school football. Not high school football, but college football on Thursdays and Fridays. And that's just invading high school territory. And I just hate to see it.
So the opening weekend, we got the Battle of the Burbs, the third annual now, Barry. And so I guess now they still have a decision to make. I do believe that game will be played this year at a campus site, which would move it to Owasso, where it had been at TU each of these first 2 years. But now they've got a decision to make, because I still haven't heard one way or the other whether they were planning it on August 29, that Thursday, or August 30, that Friday. But it looks like it will be at Owasso, whether it's up against a college game on Thursday or the OU game on Friday, to be determined. But like Barry says, it's from that perspective, it's a bigger story up here because high school football is just different up here. But I mean, OSU had a home Friday game last year, and on a big high school Friday night, and I thought it would hurt OSU's attendance, and OSU packed the house, and of course OU could play on Tuesday at 3 a.m. and it would sell out. So, but yeah, I'm a little disappointed to see it go up against a big opening weekend for the preps.
I will say this, the thing I enjoyed the most was we were all on Zoom calls when all this news hit and watching everyone work their sources, saying what's going on from college level to high school level. Bill's texting every coach he knows. This was fun in terms of that, seeing the reporting process. Now we'll see what the ramifications of a Friday night game at OU versus high school football across the state. We're going to see what happens.
At the time of recording, the OU spring game is about 11 days away. What other storylines are coming out of Norman, Eric? What are you kind of looking forward to as we approach that day?
You know what I'm looking forward to is just seeing how these teams, how these players are adapting continuously to Zach Alley, the new defensive coordinator, as well as Seth Luttrell, the offensive coordinator. It's unusual for the defense to be ahead of the offense, but that's what we're seeing because this is a veteran defense versus a offense that's still learning under Luttrell. So I think that's the big thing right now is just seeing how that offense is gelling. Jackson Arnold has been a leader on this team. He's been someone that everyone's looked up to. And, he's a quiet-natured kid at times, but here's a sophomore, and he's really embraced that role, which is really important. There's 5 quarterbacks in that room, and all of them look up to him, including Casey Thompson, the transfer who's played all over the country, it seems like. He said he called Norman his home for the final season. So I think it's huge continuously for the offense to get better, to gel, to build chemistry. And what better way to do it against a defense that's talented, but yet still learning the system under Alley or Alley's verbiage. We do know Alley and head coach Brent Venables are alike, but I think it's so important for these teams just to gel and use these practices as we go into this spring game.
Barry and Bill, you guys were both at TU last weekend. I'll throw it to Barry first. What did you see coming out of TU scrimmage? And kind of what are you looking forward to as we move on throughout this offseason?
Seemed like everyone, the second year of Coach Kevin Wilson, everyone's a lot more comfortable. There's a lot better vibe this spring than there was last spring. And from an offensive perspective, I think TU is going to be in much better shape going into this season. Their skill level at the receiver position has been upgraded in a major way. And they also will have someone they know who can get the ball to a receiver, to all those talented receivers, because although Kirk Francis has not officially been named the starter, it pretty well looks apparent that he will be the starter, and he can obviously has a great arm. And TU's offense just changed dramatically in the last few weeks of the season after he became the starting quarterback there. So I think those are areas where TU has improved.
It's with regard to guys who can catch the football. This is the deepest maybe that I've ever seen Tulsa. A fully loaded, healthy Tulsa team on opening day would have, including the tight ends, Barry, I'm going to guess like 8 guys that they would trust to throw the football to in a game. And they got a couple of portal guys, one from UTEP, who's a really interesting looking guy, 6'3". He's listed at 6'3", looks taller than that to me. Big physical guy named Ballard. Zion Steptoe's a freshman they really like. And then I'm telling you, and I wrote about Braylon Presley. Talk about Eric Bailey. How about this for a crazy storyline? So Braylon Presley, it was determined that he has a problem with his vision. He needed glasses, and they had to persuade him to try glasses. He's got contacts now. He's seeing the football much better, catching the football much better. So, and then they've got a 6'6" tight end who by midseason, I hate to say this because of NIL, the reality of NIL, by midseason, like every school in the country is going to be looking at this freshman tight end for Tulsa and saying, we want that guy. He looks like an NFL guy in the making. So that was my takeaway. Great collection of pass catching guys at TU.
And they've also got Ethan Hall, the tight end for Bixby, back for his 7th season, incredibly. And it looks like maybe for the first time, he'll be a really notable part of the passing game. And I know he sounded very excited by that. He caught a couple touchdown passes in the spring game.
Flipping the script over to OSU basketball, Steve Lutz was introduced as Oklahoma State's next head coach last week. Bill, I know a big question coming out of that introductory press conference was, is Steve Lutz going to have success retaining his players, and how much success will he have in the transfer portal?
That's
kind of feels like a trick question, because I think there's as much of an emphasis, maybe a greater immediate emphasis for Coach Lutz on determining whether he wants them to stay than on retaining them. Now, Brandon Garrison is a guy at his size with his athleticism, 6'10", big NBA body. You would want to keep him in the program. There's some other guys who are leaning this way or that way, maybe in the portal but undecided. But I think there's as much decision-making going on the Lutz side of it, determining whether he wants to keep a lot of those guys as there is from the player standpoint, whether they want to stay. So this next couple of weeks is going to be really, really revealing about how he feels about the roster he inherited, and to some extent too about whether OSU's really ready to pony up, in a heavier way on NIL.
And from an OSU standpoint, after you've had such a really horrible season this past year, maybe except for a couple of 2 or 3 players you want to build around, maybe the best thing is just to start new. So I can see something maybe not as drastic as what TU went through last year after going 5-25 and only bringing 2 players back. I could see something close to that happening at OSU.
I'm looking more forward to just seeing the passion come back. That gym is hard to play in when that's full, when it's loud, when it's rowdy. And I think that, of course, winning starts that. But I'm just looking forward to what kind of passion Lutz can bring, and just how, OSU's hungry to win. That's a program that's been so successful over the years, and it's tough to see that down. And you think about the timing of this too. Oklahoma State, is going to be in a new Big 12. new teams, new rivalries, new everything. So I'm looking forward to seeing Lutz in that arena, in that venue, recruiting to the new Big 12, trying to get portal guys to win at the new Big 12. You can win at Oklahoma State. We know that. It's just finding the right right person to do that. But again, Mike Boynton, I love the guy. I love watching him. He just wasn't the fit at the time. Just didn't get the job done. And man, you can tell it was tough for both parties to leave, but because they liked each other. But I think both parties understood it was time. So, Coach Lutz, welcome to Stillwater. I know our good friend Ian Mall, a former Western Kentucky graduate, hated losing his coach, but I think he's going to do good at Oklahoma State.
With Mike Boynton leaving, a lot of that, before he left, there was surrounding things on the lack of resources with him in the OSU basketball program. Bill, in this new era of college athletics where being successful in the transfer pool is so vital to success, how attractive is OSU as a destination?
Well, I mean, it's in an elite league. For starters, it's in one of the two best leagues in the country. So, I mean, that's the first point, selling point. But like I say, I mean, I made sure to use Mike Boynton's information in quotes because I couldn't immediately verify what he was telling me a few weeks ago when he said that we OSU are in dead last place with regard to NIL resources for basketball. And you've talked about like a half a dozen schools being right at 2 million for their roster, several others being in the $1 million to $1.5 million for their roster, and OSU being at about $500,000 for its entire roster. Well, we'll see. I mean, I do think, I had a talk with a person at the pep rally news conference last week, and he said that he believes that there is a greater recognition now for the importance of stepping up with regard to NIL, and that he believes that Steve Lutz will inspire people to give. And so, I mean, that's where we are now. Just depends on how much, what you're willing to do on your payroll. I'm going to call it what it is. It's payroll. So I do think that Lutz, after he did that pep rally, where he went, Eric, straight to a donor's house for a party. So they were hosting a party at a donor's house for him. So hopefully he had a good night there, and we'll see. But it's the money piece of the whole thing is so unbelievably important now.
Barry, kind of similar question. New coach for OSU, possibly additional resources. Are you looking at this OSU program as an attractive destination for future prospects?
Well, I think it's more attractive now than it was a few weeks ago with the coaching change. But OSU is not an unattractive job. But again, I think what it really comes down to is dollars and cents and these days and how much money a player is going to get. It's just the hard, cold fact of it. So, I mean, we saw that last week with PJ Haggerty leaving Tulsa to go to Memphis. He's happy at Tulsa, but hey, Memphis is going to be paying a lot more money. Go where the money is. So that's what it comes down to for the most part in college basketball these days.
We're staying on the basketball trail. We're winding down the NBA season. The OKC Thunder, we talked a lot about them last week on, can this team make a deep playoff run? I'll throw it to Barry first, but just kind of looking at the Western Conference standings, what teams do you feel wouldn't be good matchups for this OKC Thunder and team in the first round?
I think, that is the big question is like, can the Thunder go all the way? And I think they can go all the way, but they can also lose in the first round. I can see that happening real easy. Would not like a first round matchup with the Lakers. Would not like a first round matchup with the Mavericks. Dallas is really hot. Those are going to be two really tough teams to go against in the first round, especially from a Thunder standpoint. Not really. I think those are the two main concerns for the Thunder in round one. Later on in the playoffs, I don't think the Thunder match up well with the Denver Nuggets, even though the Thunder did have some success against them later on. Still that memory, Bill, of a game that Bill and I were at early in the season, the home opener of seeing Denver just demolish Oklahoma City just because they are a big matchup problem for the Thunder.
Bill?
Yeah, the Lakers, more than any of the teams that you would expect, probably that would be the first round matchup, the Lakers would bother me most. Just that size is the size difference is, I shouldn't say insurmountable, because I mean the Lakers are in ninth place for a reason, right? So, but yeah, that matchup would really bother me. But deeper into but somewhere right now there are a bunch of guys doing a podcast talking about matchups, and they're saying, they wouldn't want to see Oklahoma City either. So I think the value, if there's any value to not having Jalen Williams and Shea the last few games, is all those quality minutes for guys like Aaron Wiggins. And I thought there was a lot of value in that Sunday game at Charlotte. I don't care that Charlotte's a terrible team. In fact, it's kind of the Thunder's JV team, really, if you think about it. Charlotte is now, but I thought there was a lot of value in going out there and winning a close game and bolstering the confidence of a bunch of guys or several guys who are going to be really key role player bench guys in the postseason. So I don't like the Laker matchup, but at the same time, I mean, the Lakers are, 45-34. They're relatively average. I mean, I could see Oklahoma City winning that series, but I don't like the physical matchup in that series.
I agree with you, Bill, about the Charlotte game the other night. I thought that was one of those under the radar, really huge games for the Thunder after having lost 3 in a row, even though SGA and Jalen Williams had not been in the lineup, so you could sort of give them a pass. I just think that was a huge confidence boost. And also as far as making sure they don't slip into the number 4 seed. They were heading in the wrong direction. So I think that was a really huge win for the Thunder.
Bill, which 2 players do you feel is going to be most vital to a playoff run for the Thunder?
Beyond the 2 obvious guys, like,
right.
Oh man.
Let's just say beyond SGA.
Well,
you can pick 2
I would say beyond the obvious 3, because Chet Holmgren is so critically important at both ends, but especially defensively. On any given night, it's so funny how you get different results from different guys. But I would say maybe, there was a stretch of 2 weeks there, Barry, where Josh Giddey was playing out of his mind.
He had a great road trip. I mean, it was a 2-3 road trip, but I thought it was a really big road trip for Josh Giddey. So I think it would be huge. He's a huge factor. And Lou Dort is also someone I'm looking at could be really big. I mean, he is, along with SGA, they're the ones that really have some extensive playoff experience. They were in the 7-game series against the Rockets in 2020, which was a really great series. It's sort of been forgotten now, but that was sort of Lou Dort's breakout time. And because of all that he can bring to you, I think he is a really potentially very big factor for the Thunder.
And a guy who can change a game literally in a minute and a half is Isaiah Joe. And he is a guy, he's the type of guy they didn't have for so long. Just a consistent knockdown shooter off the bench. And I love Isaiah Joe's game. But Barry's right. Lou Dort he's the one guy. Well, Shea, I mean, leading the league in steals. So, I mean, you have to salute his defense. But Lou Dort is the guy over the course of the series who can make it very difficult for the other team's number 1 option offensively. So, no question, Lou Dort is a critically important guy. And Kenrich Williams, I mean, there's so many of them who can give you difference-making minutes. And that's why I love this Thunder team, is the depth of it and the chemistry of it as well, obviously. How about Jalen Williams from Arkansas? I mean, he's a key piece now, So, I mean, it's just crazy in the West. I mean, I could make Barry and I could make an argument for them to go to the finals in the conference, and you can certainly cringe at depending on what the first round matchup looks like. You just don't know.
Sort of like the Dallas Cowboys. of the NBA, Juwan. You could have made an argument Dallas was going all the way going into the postseason. And of course, we saw they crashed. So anything can happen.
Anything can happen. And Bill said an important key word there, talking about Arkansas. I'm sitting here yesterday watching TV. I get a tweet notification from Daniel Allen because I have his tweet notifications turned on, and all he said was "what." So I click on the tweet notification, and I see that John Calipari is headed to Arkansas. Big news, kind of shook the college basketball world. Eric, what did you think about that move for him?
I think it was time. We talked about Coach Boynton. Was it time for him to leave OSU? I think Kentucky and Cal had kind of worn out their time together, and I think this is going to invigorate Calipari. I mean, this is a great program. I think you think about, we were talking about NIL a little while earlier. Can you imagine the treasure chest that John Calipari is going to have at his disposal at Arkansas? Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a great program. And we talk about Oklahoma State having winning ways. Arkansas is the same way. They just really, really need that national championship. I mean, they're like Oklahoma football. It's been forever since they won a national championship, but that tradition is still there. That legacy is still there. That honor is still there. So I really think that this is a good move for Arkansas. If you're an Arkansas fan, you got to be excited about this movement. I'm looking forward to it, especially with Arkansas being in the SEC with Oklahoma. There's going to be some great OU Arkansas basketball games, and seeing John Calipari maybe going to be at Lloyd Noble Center and coaching in there. And on another note, I coached when I covered Tulsa basketball. I loved it when Memphis would come to TU and John Calipari would bring his teams to Tulsa, because those teams of 2006, 2007, 2008, those were fun Memphis teams to watch. So I'm excited about this move, and I'm happy for Arkansas fans.
John Calipari at Memphis in 08 had the best team in the country. Kansas won the national championship, but Memphis was the best team in the country. And if not for Mario Chalmers' three, Calipari would have won a national championship there too. There is a lot of wealth, and I'm being literal about wealth, money. There's tremendous wealth in Northwest Arkansas, and it's a one school state, really, right? And so limitless resources will be pouring in to help John Calipari. Plus, they fairly recently renovated Bud Walton Arena, which was, even pre-renovation, was still a palace for basketball, just beautiful place. So, it doesn't have the tradition of Kentucky, certainly, but Arkansas basketball is a sleeping giant. And I say sleeping. They went to the Elite Eight 2 years ago and 3 years ago. But Calipari will not lack for resources in Fayetteville. He'll have everything he needs or will need to put together an Elite Eight or Final Four type roster. He'll have it.
Juwan, what I found interesting was I guess Jerry Jones got involved in this process.
Really?
Trying to help his alma mater. And so I guess from an Arkansas standpoint, you have to hope that his influence on getting or his part in getting a new coach for Arkansas works out better in the postseason than what's occurred with all the coaches he's hired in the last 25 years with the Dallas Cowboys.
Barry, I'll throw it right back to you. With Kentucky losing in the first round this year of the NCAA tournament, was this the right move for Kentucky, and who could you possibly seeing replace Calipari at Kentucky?
I think it's definitely the right move for Kentucky. Arizona's Tommy Lloyd is someone that I think is very intriguing to me. He's had a lot of success at Arizona the last few years. I think he might be a fit there. What about Brad Underwood? Isn't it about time for him to move to another school? And obviously very successful at Illinois. And I've seen Billy Donovan's name being floated around. That would be interesting, especially since he might not be returning next season for the Bulls. He might need a new job. And so it might be a good time for him to leave the Bulls and get back in the college basketball. The college basketball world's a lot different than when he left it after having great success at Florida.
It's funny. I keep hearing Scott Drew's name from Baylor. That's another name that I wonder about who would he be? What kind of fit would he be in Lexington? I'm really curious about that. You mentioned Billy Donovan, Barry. Just go back to what he did at Florida. I mean, it was incredible how they went back to back, right? Is that right, Bill? Do you remember?
Last time before UConn, they were the last one to do it.
Yeah, so back to back. So I think those are the two names I'd really keep an eye on. The one person I'm really curious about is Jay Wright. Can you pull him back to the coaching sidelines? I don't know if that would happen or not, but you look at the success he had too. So there's a lot of big time heavyweight names out there that you could go for. Brad Stevens, I mean, he's with the Bulls now, but look at what he did at Butler all those years. In the college game. So I really think that if you look back and you just try to find some of these big names, there's some out there, and Kentucky fans, they're like Oklahoma football fans. They're going to want a heavyweight. They're going to want someone that can change the program around, and they're not going to settle for an unknown name. So that's what makes this whole coaching search pretty curious.
They'll throw. They would throw. I mean, they would if they felt like. I mean, there is no limit to the people they'll look at. They'll look at Dan Hurley. They will. So is Dan Hurley a UConn lifer, or would Kentucky throw to make him the first $10 million basketball coach? I don't think there's any limit. Jay Wright, did he get out of basketball when he did because he didn't feel like he could win at Villanova in the NIL era, or he just didn't want to be part of the NIL process? But at Kentucky, there's not going to be a limit on that. I mean, Jay Wright is a real name to look at. He's only 60, but I mean, crap, he's a very youthful, healthy 60-year-old guy. Who else did you say? And Chris Beard, I've seen him speculated, but you know what? That's a name I would scratch. I mean, why would you bring in a guy with recent baggage? Because it hadn't been that long ago that Billy Gillespie was there, and Coach Sutton had a situation there. So I don't think they would go for a coach like Chris Beard, who does have recent baggage, but Dan Hurley, Jay Wright, Scott Drew. I mean, it's going to be a who's who of guys who will get consideration. And within a week or so, they're going to make a blockbuster hire. I promise you. It will not be it won't be the kind of hire where you say, that's odd. No, it'll be a big time guy because they're the Yankees.
Gino Auriemma. Let's put some money on Gino.
I've always wanted to see him coach on the men's side.
As we do at the end of every show, we're doing our quick final takes. Bill, what take do you have for us this week?
Well, I mean, just the whole tone of our collectively, our whole staff, the whole tone of the day changed when they got that text message an hour ago. So just that, TV calls the shots, man. And by the way, I guess it deserves mention that the women's championship game drew 18.5 million viewers, and obliterated by 4 million viewers the record that had been set in the semifinal round of the Connecticut-Iowa game. So talking about bouncing from topic to topic, but I guess I should just close with that the women's game, we'll see if it can be sustained after Caitlin Clark moves on to pro basketball, but the women's game this year made a greater leap in 1 year's time, I think, than any sport ever has in 1 year's time, ever.
Eric?
I think college softball continues to be the one thing that I'm excited about to cover. We saw Oklahoma lose 2 of 3 down at Texas. First series loss since 2011. First back-to-back losses since 2020. They only scored 7 runs in a 3-game series. That's the second lowest in 12 years. A lot of first time evers or longest in a while since then for Oklahoma. They're going to try to bounce back tonight. We're taping this on a Tuesday. They play Wichita State tonight, and then they have a home series against BYU on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. First game back after a 7-game road swing. It's just going to see how they respond to losing games, something they haven't done in a couple of years. They're at 3 losses last year. They only had 1 loss excuse me. They're at 3 losses this year. They only had 1 loss last year. So I'm kind of curious to see how they bounce back. as well as OSU and OU softball, number 2 and 3 in the nation, setting up for a great Bedlam series in a couple of weeks. And let's not take our eyes off Tulsa softball. This is a team that went to Wichita State and won 2 of 3. They're playing really well. They got a game at Oklahoma State on Wednesday. Of course, TU beat OSU in Tulsa earlier this year, so OSU is going to be looking for a little bit of revenge. Chrissy Strimple is doing a great job at Tulsa. I've been really impressed with her. You know, she's really building it. They can hit the ball. They lead the conference in batting average. So softball in this state is still pretty big, and they're playing at a high level, all 3 Division I schools.
My parting shot, Juwan, will be on how quickly, another reminder on how quickly things can change. Hard to believe now, seeing what a juggernaut UConn men's basketball has become again, that it wasn't so long ago where TU was dominating against UConn. Can you believe it? TU men's basketball won 6 in a row against UConn when they were members of the same conference just a few years ago. It wasn't that long ago. The last TU win over UConn was in 2019, and which was a classic game at the Reynolds Center, one of the most interesting games in that arena's history, when you saw both coaches, Frank Hurley and Dan Hurley, both get thrown out of the game. So that was crazy. UConn's last visit to TU was in 2020, which was a good TU team. UConn did break the 6-game losing streak against TU. But yeah, it wasn't that long ago that TU was just dominating what is now the premier basketball program in America.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, maybe TU can get back to that next year. But so for Bill Haisten, Eric Bailey, Barry Lewis, I'm Juwan Lee. This has been another episode of the Tulsa World Sports Extra Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.